Hello, and thank you so much for coming on to Out on a Limb. That didn't work. That's all right. Thank you for stopping by. There you go. With Out on a Limb with Gabby, Allan. Today I have a huge pleasure of having Jennifer Bonds on. You guys are going to have so much fun listening to what she has to say. We're going to be talking books. We're going to be talking writing. We're going to be talking all the fun things. So make sure that you plug in, and you can do other things while you're listening to us, but definitely listen. I'm just saying, don't miss it. So Jennifer Bonds, I'm so excited to have you here. And Jennifer writes a lot of royal books, which I absolutely adore. And so we're going to ask her the only question I ever ask is, what is it that you do and how do you do it?
Sure. So I write rom-coms in the royal vein. I write contemporary romance, and I write new adult sports romance as well. So a little bit of everything.
Awesome.
As far as how I do it, to be honest, when I'm trying to come up with an idea for a new story, a lot of times I am sort of looking at the world around me, watching the news, reading headlines. I had a book last year that came out, and it's about a female football player. And so that was actually inspired by a news article on Becca Longo, who was the first high school athlete to get a football scholarship as a female to a Division II school. So awesome. To be honest, I take a lot of inspiration from the world around me.
But why not? You know what I mean? Like I'll see something in a news article, or I'll run across something on TV or YouTube or something, and I'm like, oh, now that could be a very interesting idea, and I think it also makes it relatable, because other people have seen this news story and they're like, hey, that's really cool.
It's funny that you say that. I've had a couple people, so there have been a few more female athletes who've gotten football scholarships since then. And I've had people tag me on social media and say, oh my gosh, this reminds me of your book. And so I always laugh and I say, you know what? It was in fact inspired by a news article, and I kind of tag them back to the athlete who inspired me to write the story. And that's one that's near and dear to me, because the heroine in that book is also a mechanical engineering major. So she's really into STEM and she's really into numbers. And she obviously is an athlete as well. But as a mom of a daughter, I want her to be able to see that. And as she looks and she reads stories, seeing women who are doing things a little bit differently than maybe they've been portrayed in the past, and seeing that there's really, truly nothing she can't do.
Exactly. Well, and why not? I think sometimes that's what it comes down to. I know for myself, when I was growing up, and reading things, I totally wanted to own a pig with a spider that could write out things in the web. But you know what I mean? I read a lot of Sweet Valley High. I wanted to be that girl. I read Babysitter's Club. I was like, where is my mystery? I'm already babysitting children. I need a mystery now. And so that you do tend to, especially if you're a big reader, you do tend to put yourself in those positions. And as you're growing up and putting yourself in the grouping that you're reading, if you can encourage somebody to think, I bet you I like football, and whether or not they actually do it, the fact that they could want to try is really enough right there. You know what I mean? I think it makes a big deal. So I do have a question going back a little bit. You said that, so you write rom-com, contemporary romance, and then new adult. So let me ask, because not everybody knows exactly what that is. New adult is going to be like your 19 to 20 something set.
Yeah, so a lot of times you'll see that late teen, maybe 18, 19,
up
to maybe early to mid 20s. And so I am really passionate about new adult. I love YA as well. So, kind of that upper edge of YA and new adult. You've got characters who are sort of venturing out into the world for the first time. They sometimes think they know quite a bit, and oftentimes discover there's a lot more to learn about the world around them.
Didn't we all think we knew? I remember being 18 and I'm like, I got this all figured out. And then I'm like, wow, you could have really used maybe a little bit of guidance. Just saying.
And so they're kind of venturing out into the world. They're figuring out who they are. They're figuring out how they fit in the world, what their place is, and who they want to be. And there's oftentimes a lot of angst that comes with that.
Of course.
And so there's a big wide spectrum for new adult readers. Some people love the angst. They want it all. And some people kind of like a low-key story. So I kind of ride the line in the middle, a little bit of angst, but a lot of humor as well.
Good.
And so for me, those stories are really exciting because I feel like that's a time in my life I remember really well. And so I kind of always laugh and tell people, oh, the things I learned the best were the things I screwed up the biggest. So
yes,
I will never make that mistake again.
Yes.
But it's fun. It's fun to kind of relive that time in your life when you are figuring things out and where you want to go and who you want to be. And, are you going to be the person you thought you were going to be when the time comes to stand up and make those choices?
Yes.
Or, there's sometimes you find in retrospect, maybe I didn't handle that the best, and how do I do it next time?
So with new adults, obviously, okay, not obviously, because not everybody is in on the thing, but most romance novels, 99.9% of romance novels, the expectation is a happily ever after, which is called the HEA for those of you who are listening. And then there's also the HFN, the happy for now. So with your characters being so much younger, do you try to make it a happily ever after, like with the wedding and the kids epilogue, or are you more of a like happily for now, and I'm not really sure where the future is going to take me, but at this point I'm happy and I feel like I made some good decisions?
Oh, I love this question, actually. So I am hardcore in the happily ever after camp.
Okay.
But to be fair, as I think about it a little bit, the way you phrased it, I find myself wondering that some people might interpret it as happily for now, because like you said, they're very young. So again, a lot of times they'll be coming out of college and maybe starting that first career, or have just started their first career. And we know young people now don't marry as early as maybe we did. That's pretty common now, not 20. To marry until you're 30, have some kids until you're 35. Yeah. Right. Like, I was very young.
My brother has a little boy. He's a year old. And I'm 44. My kid is 20. And so this little boy comes in and I'm like, I don't know how people do this in their 40s. Like I had mine at 22 or 24, you know what I mean? And so I'm like, I couldn't even imagine starting over right now, like at all. But anyway, sorry, got off topic.
No,
I find it very interesting. So maybe in your books, because I will be honest, I haven't read any of your new adults, but I am definitely going to go out and get some now, because I love that period also. I just hadn't really seen a lot coming out that spoke to what I wanted to read. But I'm definitely interested in yours. So when you end it, do you tend to end it in a way that kind of leaves it a little more open? Like if you're going to write a category Harlequin, basically they want the wedding at the end. She's walking down the aisle, they have a child, something that shows you that this is the rest of their life. And so like, do you do more of riding off into the sunset?
So to be honest, I do a lot of proposals.
Okay.
So again, they happen. And sometimes it's just, in my mind, if I show that they're still together and they're committed and they are giving you that I love you forever, that's a promise. So even if there's no ring, to me, hopefully to my readers, that is a promise of forever. Yes. But I don't necessarily write that epilogue, way down in the distance, that 10-year check-in. I typically try to keep mine within 6 months or a year. Okay. And a lot of times that gives me the chance to wrap up the story and whatever they may have been going through at that time, to kind of see how it turned out. Right. But in my mind, when they are committed, man, they are together.
That is it. No, and I love that. I mean, that was one of the, so I obviously, we know each other. So I'm going to say something that you already know as if you don't, but I write cozy mysteries. Oh my goodness. So, and I do put romance in there, but my romances tend to span like the series, 5-6 books. And I have to kind of wind them out a little slower, because if they're situated in the first one, then it doesn't always look interesting to keep on reading it. But I do like the idea of the happily ever after. It's one of the reasons that I read a lot of romance, is that I want that at the end. I want to know that they're going to be okay. I want to know that they're going to be able to be together, because I don't like books that don't end like that, like at all. Even fantasy. I love fantasy. Do not kill my favorite person at the end. That is an absolute automatic. Let me see if I can make a hole in my wall from across the room. I am not a fan. So I do love the romance at the end, but I can understand how you would maybe want to leave it a little bit like the proposal, but not necessarily 10 years down the road, because who knows what it's going to be like. So do you find that your readers like how that works out for you? And is that different than how most people do it, or is that a pretty good standard for the new adult?
Yeah, I would say so. It's just like contemporary romance. There's two different kinds. There's the hey, I have a series and we follow the couple through 3 or 4 books, and man, they ride those highs and lows. And then there's the other side, which is what I write, which is standalones, and each one wraps up. So I would say, yeah, it's not uncommon to see them engaged. I would say it is also not uncommon to see that 5-year down the road look. But I also noticed that a lot of the authors I follow, I adore Elle Kennedy. I think her new adult sports romances are fabulous. And she does a really nice job of checking in with her characters periodically. In fact, she has a book coming out this fall where that's what the entire book is. It's following up with each of the couples from the series.
Oh my gosh, how cute.
Readers do love when you come back and revisit those series and those couples that they love so much. My series is newer, so I haven't done that yet, but I would never say never, because 10 years we might want to check in with Carter and Austin.
Yeah, every time I say never, it is an absolute guarantee that the next thing I do is exactly that.
Yep. That's how it works.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm like, oh, I would never. Oh, here I go. Let's go ahead and do it. I don't know why.
Give it a try.
And then I'm like, I would never win the lottery.
Yeah.
Why is
that? Probably
the
one time that's not going to work for you.
Right. Seriously. Oh my gosh. So the sports books that you're writing, and I don't want to harp only on your or stay only on your new adult, because I want to talk about all of it. But those are the new adult. Now, are they? I want to say they're hockey.
Oh my gosh, I love hockey. I will write hockey, but they're
not. They're football. Okay.
They're football.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I don't know why I thought I saw a hockey stick on one of yours. Okay. Well, that's a Misty thing. I will never make the wrong assumption about an author without checking first. And then I just did. So because that's how I roll. So football. So do you, like, as far as research type stuff, do you like check out high school football teams, or are you just involved because of your kids and know enough to feel like you can roll with it?
So no, we are not a plays football family.
Okay.
We're a hockey watching family, actually. So I should be writing hockey, and I have written hockey in my adult series.
Maybe that's what I was thinking of, the hockey in your adult series.
That probably is it.
All right. That makes me just a little bit less of a failure, and I appreciate it.
And you know where you saw the hockey sticks? They're on my book on the side of Cupboard Makers. That's why
yes. Okay.
Painted on the building.
All right. I feel better now. I was like, wow.
It's not you. You're right.
I messed that one up, but okay. I feel better now. I mean, it happened. I would own it if I did it wrong, but I'm like, where did I get that? Anyway, so with the football, you're not necessarily watchers, but you just felt that football would be something that they could like scholarship through in college, and so like an underlying story.
Yeah, so in the case of this one, like I said, I had seen the articles online about Becca Longo and her scholarship, and that really inspired me because I thought that was a really unique story, and one that I haven't seen told a lot. Not to say that there's none other out there, but I haven't seen it as frequent as some of the others. Right. And as it turns out, football is one of the few programs where athletes tend to get a full ride. There are a lot of athletic scholarships, but things like soccer, where my heroine is at, it's almost unanimously partials. So that was one of the things that I really liked about it, and it helped set up the story. I'm a super plotter, so a lot of people
all right
say, boy, right? Here we go.
No, I love it. We'll be talking about that next. Go ahead. You're a super plotter.
So research is my best friend and my worst enemy, because I am that person who, just the way that my brain is wired, if I'm going to write about something, like I need to know like 8,000 pounds to give you a 5-pound view. So it's good because I will do all the research and I will learn all the stuff. However, it takes a lot of time. And so I laugh because, some people say when you're writing, just highlight it and make a note that says, I'll come back to this.
No.
But like my brain does not work that way. It all has to be on the page in order when it's happening.
Thank you. Okay. So we got a couple things to unpack there. For one, so you are a linear writer. You have to write in order. You go from chapter 1 through to the end of the story.
So I am never say never, Misty.
Okay.
I am almost exclusively a linear writer. I have never written out of order in my life. People mention it and I break out in hives in the process. However, I put a manuscript literally this morning. I texted a writer friend and said, I know that I need to do XYZ to raise the stakes. I'm not sure how to do it, and my deadline's coming really fast. So I'm going to skip those chapters and just keep going with the rest of the book because I know what happens. And she was like, even my husband was like, can you do that? And I was like, we'll find out.
The worst thing that's going to happen is that I go back and write those 3 chapters.
Right.
Yeah.
I said, I can smooth it out in editing, but I know where it's going. I know what needs to happen. I'm not ready to write that part yet. So I'm going to try something different today.
Okay. I actually did that. I realized I started writing a book. My first chapter was like, bam, 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 bam. And I'm like, so now where do you go? Because that was kind of the highlight of the entire book, which means it's like in chapter 8, not chapter 1.
Right.
Now what are you going to do? And I was like, oh, ow, I feel dead inside. So I had to go back, and I can't tell you how much of an elephant in the room that chapter was on the back of my manuscript, because like I was in page 38, but there were 53 pages, and that really freaked me out because how am I going to get there? And I was like, just stop it. I understand that you are super, super anal retentive about stuff like this, but you just flow, please, right now for a little bit. So did you, after making that text this morning, did you then go on and start writing?
Oh yes, I literally skipped those 2 chapters and started writing. And I will, I will tell you that the words flowed more easily today than they have in weeks. Partly it's probably necessity, and it's probably also like, you were talking about the elephant on your back, and I feel like I've been thinking about this plot challenge, and I've been putting too much pressure on myself to solve it and get it written and move around it. So I was like, you know what? I think because I paused it, moved around it, went where I know the story needs to go, like the words are flowing out of my fingertips.
Okay.
And it gives me a little bit of relief to go back and rethink how I want to execute this escalating of stakes.
Well, and I guess there's also the possibility that with the additional chapters, sorry about the dogs, with the additional chapters written, that you can smooth that out, and that is out of the way now, because like I know, so for me with writing a mystery, sometimes I have to plot backwards. So that's going to be my next question after this, but I have to plot backwards. Like I know who's dead, I know who killed them, but now I have to like go backwards to figure out how would the sleuth be able to figure that out? Who are they going to have to talk to? Who has what clue? That kind of thing. And so I actually do it more than I think I do. I don't give myself a lot of credit for that, but I don't write scenes. So scenes I have to write in order because I always build off the last one. And I guess I've always been afraid that if I don't have the scene before that, how am I going to build? But that's a very interesting concept. So when you call yourself a super plotter, are you outlining, timelining, synopsizing? What does your super plotting look like?
All of the above.
Oh,
so
do you use Roman numerals? You got to tell me that. Do you use Roman numerals?
And I don't use Roman numerals.
Okay.
I use like 1s and 2s. So I am a hardcore plotter. And every book I've written has to be outlined, and there's pages and pages of outlines. There's a note file with notes on all the characters. And there is always the dreaded synopsis, which probably like 90% of writers is my least favorite thing. But publisher wants the synopsis before you write the book sometimes.
Yes.
And then you have to know what's going to happen.
I know.
So I do all of the above, and then I kind of try to work back into it. But what works really well for me is to write that outline scene by scene,
Okay.
and to kind of write it. And it's pretty informal, but I mean, it's broken out by chapter, it's broken out by point of view, and it sort of helps me know where is the story going, and then,
Okay.
kind of what are those emotional highs and lows I'm hitting in each one.
Yes.
And because I'm super organized, then I map it all out in boxes so I can kind of see the total shape of the story, where it's going to hit its midpoint.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's
all of its beats. So yeah, that's how my brain works. It's just I used to be in business, and so I worked with a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of numbers and a lot of facts all the time.
right.
And so I think that's how my brain processes information.
Which, I mean, so one of the things that I really am hoping to do with this podcast is to show people that there are as many ways to write a book as there are people writing them. And even like, as you just, made a huge and wonderful example of, you could have done it one way for a lot of books, and then something happens and you have to be able to pivot. And you have to, there's that meme that says when something goes wrong, just yell plot twist and keep on going. Sometimes that's what happens. And so I really think that somebody hearing that, you usually do it this way, but you did have to figure out how to pivot and what you did to help yourself pivot, that's going to encourage somebody else to say, okay, this is not, all is not lost. I'll figure it out. Look, if Jennifer Bonds can do it, I can do it.
That is absolutely right. If I can do it, they can do it.
Right. I love when somebody said, I forget what they were going to, it was something medical. And they were like, well, I just thought if Misty Simon can do it, I can do it. And that was before you actually told me your story earlier. And I was like, well, you don't really want to know how exactly Misty Simon did it, because there were moments in there that
don't look behind the curtain.
Right. Yes. We're back to Oz. Don't look behind the curtain. You don't want to see what it looks like. But it is, I mean, do you function better with deadlines though? Like, have you, previous to not being published, pre-published, as I like to call it, did you set your own deadlines, or were you still working and so you kind of had a different schedule going?
So I think my situation's a little bit unique. So I want to elaborate on that, because I don't want it to sound like I sold my first book.
Right.
So when I started writing romance, I had actually worked as a publicist for a romance publisher first. So I made some connections, working as a publicist, just trying to learn a little bit of the backside of the business.
Yeah.
So I was lucky in that I was able to sell my first romance manuscript, and it needed a ton of work. It got a revise and resubmit, and then I did more work on it, and I did more work on it, and then eventually I said, why did they buy this book? I don't even think they like it. It's just complete and utter garbage. But it was not. It was me being a new baby writer, learning how to work with editors and understanding that there was potential and somebody liked my face. And that was a learning experience.
Those are two big things. I think that's another thing that people discount, is that, there are stories out there where like somebody has submitted and the editor's like, woof, this is going to need some work, but the voice is so, it just grabs me. And I know I can tell from the other parts of the story that are awesome that they would be able to fix these, and it's worth making that, staking that claim. I mean, my first manuscript that I ever sent to the Wild Rose Press, apparently chapter 13 was in the middle of chapter 7. I sent the wrong
But
file.
you sold it.
I did. she emailed me back and she was like, so I was really enjoying the story through chapter 7, and then I'm just wondering if you sent me the right file, because 13 is in the middle. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like with 5 writer friends, and I'm like whipping out my computer. This was years and years ago, like 2005. So I'm like, I need Wi-Fi. I need some kind of internet. Like I need internet. So I'm like looking, and I'm like, oh my God, I sent her the completely unedited version. I am so lucky that she didn't just reject me and say, thanks so much for trying. Please don't ever send me anything again. You know what I mean? But there must have been something in there that made her, and now she's still my editor in 2021. I must have made an impression somehow. But, with yours, I think sometimes if they find a new voice, which by the way, I absolutely adore your voice. It is very, it's very inviting. I think that's the best word that I can come up with. It's very much something where you're like reading and you just feel like you're sucked into the story, and there's no putting it down. I have told Daniel before, look, if you don't want the spaghetti to burn, I suggest you go handle it, because I'm reading a Jennifer Bond's book. He's like, oh gee, all right.
That's what it's like to be married to a writer. You got to cover dinner.
Oh yeah, that is not gonna hurt you. Not gonna,
right.
You know how to cook this stuff. But so so when you're in there and you have the opportunity to change it, this is just for everybody who's listening. Do not ignore the revise and resubmit. If you really liked telling that story, if you really feel like it needs a home, and if you truly like the publisher that you're submitting to, which I hope you do. If you're actually submitting, it would be better if you like them, but don't take the revise and resubmit as a rejection necessarily. It really is an offer to look again, and the editor does not have to do that. They could just say, thank you so much, this doesn't fit with our catalog or whatever. So your revise and resubmit, you sent it in and they were like, this is great, except we still need these 17 things done.
That is correct. And so what I would tell you is yes, and it was very painful.
Yeah,
I have since learned to actually enjoy the editing process.
Yeah.
I mean, not usually on day one when you get those comments.
No, I always read them and then I shut it.
Then I gotta take a break.
Yeah. Yep. Because I know they're gonna make sense to me at some point.
Correct.
But right now I'm irritated because I really wanted you to just love the book and say, I don't see anything except these three comments. Yeah. Yes. Right. I said that to Essie at Kensington one time, because I also write for Kensington on top of the Wild Rose Press. And I said to her, someday I want to send you a manuscript that doesn't need anything. And she said, and then I'll have no job. And I was like, well, that's an interesting way to look at it. And because that is what an editor is supposed to do, is help you make it better. You've made it good. Now let's make it better. So yeah.
And I really have embraced it as a learning process. So again, do I agree with everything that comes across? No, absolutely not. But I've learned an absolute ton. So I've been really fortunate to have a couple of really good editors who give fantastic feedback. They give really good examples, and it's helped me identify sort of my soft spots so that I do a better job when I'm writing and I know what to look for as I'm going through and doing a self-edit before I submit. So I continue to have that hope that fewer comments every time. But I mean, again, I think it's a phenomenal learning opportunity, especially when you get different editors who touch the same manuscript. You get different points of view. So I actually really enjoy it. But to your original question, I'm very deadline driven. If I set my own deadlines for my indie titles, what sometimes happens is they end up kind of getting pushed to the side for things that are contracted. And I have a little bit of harder time staying on track with that. So what I know about myself is I do work better if I have a hard deadline and I have accountability. I mean, this week, my son had a respiratory infection, and he and my husband were home for 4 days and nobody could leave the house. And I'm like, I have so many words to write. I love you. Leave me alone.
Right. Yes.
Go in another room.
Right. Anywhere not here. We must have more than 2 rooms in this house. The one you were in and the one that you're in now. I need you to go elsewhere.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Have your hug and then move along, please.
Right. That I used to do that with the 20-year-old. I was like, what can I do for you? I just want to hug you. Okay, here's your hug. Okay, go. Because look, I think on the one hand, it is really good to show your children that your dream is important, and but also to not shut out everybody just so you can have it. You know what I mean? Like I've talked to some people that have an issue with that. They're like, well, I don't want my kids to feel like they're not wanted. And I'm like, your kids feel like they're wanted. Kids want you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's really okay for you to tell them, you know what, mommy's writing right now. Dinner will be ready in half an hour, just like every other night. Go ahead and do your thing. And as soon as I'm done, I'll come right over. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I have a kid that's going to Savannah College of Art and Design, when initially we were going to be a chemical engineer. And I was like, are you doing this? Are you doing what you think is the right thing? And I get kind of. And I was like, please don't do that. Don't get a degree in something that you don't want to do. Get a degree in something that you do. And stop motion animation is like a dream. All right, follow it. But I think part of that comes from being a parent that says, I also have a dream. I'd really like your help in achieving it by, you doing the dishes instead of me. That's not a bad thing.
It's funny you bring that up. I think that is really important, to be honest. And we talk about that a lot in our house as well, because like a lot of writers, I started somewhere else in my career. Like I said, I had a business degree, I had an MBA, I had a really great job, but I worked constantly and I eventually was not happy. Yeah. And when I looked back and said, gosh, when I was entering college, what did I really want to do? Well, I wanted to be a writer, but that wasn't practical. So it wasn't very practical, you know, even journalism, local papers were shutting down, things were being consolidated. And so I switched out of a writing major into a business major. Okay. And, you know, I made a nice career for myself, but I was not happy. And so when I had kids and I was missing everything because I was working all the time. Yes. My husband and I just looked at it and said, what would make us really happy? You being home more. And I said, and me would be writing. So, you know, I had to juggle both. Well, I guess family job and side hustle of writing for several years before I was able to write full time. But I tell my kids all the time, like, do what you want to do. I tell my husband, if they say I'm going to get a degree in dance, I'm going to support it because, you know, I didn't believe in myself enough the first time around. And I wasted a lot of time that I could have been practicing my craft, getting better at writing, learning the publishing industry. I am on board with that, but I think sometimes that, like, for myself, so I went to trade school because the college was not happening at the moment then. And I became a medical administrator, and I started writing at 23, I think, or something close to there. And I didn't start publishing until a little later, but I feel like sometimes my timeline was exactly what it was supposed to be. And while I may have wished that I had done something differently, I also kind of acknowledge that, like, if what is happening for me right now happened for me 20 years ago, I would have totally messed it up. That's just all there's to it. It would have totally messed up. And then I would have written a book about you.
Right.
learning during that pivotal time of your life.
Yes. Yes.
What mistakes you made and what you did right.
Right. Your video froze. I don't know if you can do anything to make it unfreeze. Oh, I can still hear you.
On my end.
Huh. That's very strange. All right. Well, we're in the midst of conversation. I just wanted to, I was like, oh, you just froze, but you may come back in a second. We'll leave that. But yeah, I mean, I get that. And I do wish for you that you could have believed more in yourself, but you also are then encouraging your children to do that. And that's a beautiful thing. You know what I mean?
Right. When my daughter tells me she wants to be a vet / paleontologist / baker, I'm like, you can do all those things. They might not all be professional, but you can have an interest in and explore all three of those things.
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that either. You know, live dreams. It's hard. There are people who did not have their first book come out until they were in their 80s.
Yep. Never too late.
Yeah, no, gosh, no, never. And, you know, as you're telling the stories that speak to you, enjoy them, which then brings me to your royals. So what made you decide that you wanted to royally write about contemporary? Those are the rom-coms?
They are. So, yeah. Well, you know, again, it's funny. So I was just talking to my editor and trying to come up with a new series as I was getting back into writing. And so I had a couple of things that I had been working on and going in a different direction. And we had jumped on a call and she was like, let's just chat about where you want to go and what you want to do. And I was like, okay, well, you know, I've been seeing the Royals family in the news quite a bit lately. I feel like there could be some stories there. I find it fascinating. I've never been one of those people who's followed royals, but I think as we've seen things across the pond in the last couple of years just explode in the media, I think it just raised a lot of questions about what would that really be like. Maybe it's not as amazing as we all thought it might be to be royal. It looks good for a while, but lately, age of social media, not so much. And so we
Exactly.
kicked around a couple of ideas, and that was the one that stuck. And so,
Okay.
I was really interested in trying something different. My first series of contemporary romance were very steamy. So they were category, they were written for Entangled's Brazen imprint, which is pretty high heat level.
Yes.
And so those were fun to write, but I was ready to try something a little bit different. And so the Rom Com was definitely a new challenge for me because I'd never written that before. But they were also really fun, especially because they were stories that sometimes when I was like, oh my God, I need this pop of humor, or I need to kind of figure out this situation, I could spitball with my husband.
Right.
And, he gives me some really off the wall stuff, but every now and then there's a gem in there.
Well, yeah. I have one of those myself. I'm like, well, what about da 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 da? And he's like, do you remember Funny Farm? I think I'm going to write a squirrel book. And I was like, oh my God, go away. That is not what I needed. And he's like, okay, so what if you blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, now that is more what I was looking for. Thank you so much for jumping on the train. It is nice to have somebody that you can kind of bounce the ideas off of. And I know sometimes people have editors that do that also. I have never had an editor like that. I've always just whatever I'm writing, I write and then I send it in to you and hope that you like it. So that's really cool that they would talk about like where you are heading. So you publish with Entangled and then you also do some of your own indie stuff?
Correct. Yeah. So my new adult series is independent, and then the rest of my titles are with Entangled.
Very cool. And I've heard really good things about Entangled. So I'm super excited that you're over there. I think, they really seem to have a bead on how to make things rock within the publishing world. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I've had a very good experience. I've been really thrilled with my editors. We've had great working relationships. And I think what's nice about it is, because they're a smaller publisher, there's a lot of emphasis on women. There's a lot of flexibility. Not that I ever want to miss a deadline, but
totally
sometimes
understand.
It happens.
Yes.
COVID, life happens.
Right.
So there's a lot of flexibility. They're really big on, promoting diverse voices, focusing on promoting women within the industry, lifting each other up. So for me, that's been a really good fit overall. And of course, like I said, when I came to them, I was just a little new baby author who didn't know a lot. So I appreciate all the training and all the learning that has come along with that.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, even with the Wild Rose Press, I learned a ton, and it's interesting. A lot of people want to like come straight out the gate with Random House. And my thought is, honestly, I don't think I would have ever wanted to do that because you're walking into a situation with a lot of people who've been doing this for a really long time. And a lot of it comes down to how much are you making us? And if you're not making us that much, then we're going to let you go. Whereas if you do, as a new writer, start with a smaller publisher, there's a lot to learn. And they have, to me, they have more leeway to take on somebody who maybe does not have the writing chops just yet, but they really want to make sure that you get them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
it's been really good. And that's, again, as a new writer, that is really what I needed.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have been prepared.
No. Well, and I think too, sometimes like if you hit Random House with your very first book and it's super phenomenal, now you have the sophomore book to write. How are you going to do that? You know what I mean? Like people are going to be like, your first one was awesome. Then they walk away and you're like, and the second, they're like, oh yeah, I only got through like the first 3 pages. Sorry about that.
The other thing that's really nice about it that I like is the authors.
Yes.
We have a loop where we can chat and talk to each other. So beyond social media, we have a private space to talk. And so everybody's really supportive. And I think that's true throughout the romance industry in general. Right. But it is nice to, you don't feel like you're cold calling because, hey, you can say, hey, we write for the same publisher and I'm having this challenge, or can somebody hop on a Zoom and can we talk about it? Or, hey, does anybody have experience with this? So it's also opened up networking possibilities and just folks who have more experience than me that I can chat with and ask questions to if I ever have a need to do that.
Well, and then you can answer questions also for people who are just coming in as fresh because you're learning, so that then you can turn around and help other people learn.
Absolutely.
That is a beautiful thing. I absolutely love it. We are closing in on over 40 minutes. Because I know, isn't that funny? I love it. So I'm going to ask you my last question, which changes sometimes. So we're not going to say that it's a specific written down one. Where can we find you? And what can I look forward to next so that I can yet again burn spaghetti?
Sure. So I would say you can find me on the web at jenniferbonds.com.
Okay.
I am on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, Twitter at jbondswrites. Right now, I am getting ready to release this fall the third book in my Royally Engaged series, Crown Jewel. So for those who read it, pretty exciting. We're finally getting Pippa, the little sister story, last but not least, which is a really fun story. So I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome.
And then hopefully later this fall, I'll also be releasing the second book in my new adult sports romance series, Catching Quinn.
I love it.
I don't have a date for that one yet, but it will be before the holidays. So very excited. Lots of deadlines.
So I'm going to ask you one more. We got a couple minutes. So when you make yourself a deadline, as opposed to having a deadline like through Entangled, can you give a couple of tips on the things that you like take into consideration on how to space out that deadline?
Yeah. So I typically try to look at what do I need to accomplish. So again, because I'm a plotter, I already have that outline, and I kind of know, hey, I can on average write a chapter a day as long as things are well plotted and they're going well. I have some writer friends looking at you who can write 10,000 words in a day. I will probably never produce 10,000 words in a day. I know this about myself. Even when I'm having my best day, it's maybe 7,000.
I got you.
So I try to back into it. So how you talked about kind of sometimes backing into the story from the mystery, I back into a deadline, and I kind of look at it and say, I know I need, 4 weeks for editing, and I need 4 weeks for formatting, and I need, 8 weeks to write this book. And of course I have to consider my family schedule as well. So, when do the kids have vacations and holidays and days off and things like that. So I just back into it on a spreadsheet and figure out, where do I start? Where am I going to finish? And have I given myself a little bit of wiggle room? Where I find that I struggle is life happens. So even with those buffers, sometimes, again, kids are homesick, something's happened. And it's a little bit easier to, I think, when you work from home, let home life kind of dig into your work time. People are like, let's go to lunch, or like, can you wash my soccer cleats today? And things that sound very simple, like they should only take 5 minutes, and you're like, wait, the whole day's gone. What did I just do?
Yes. Thank you. It's so funny because like I'll sometimes go in with the best laid plans. I'm like, okay, I mean, I've even gone into like a calendar, the calendars that I used to make schedules for hairdressing. And so they've got those huge 15-minute slot. And I would like, okay, at the top of the hour, I'm doing this. And I would write my little arrow down to take up that column. And I'd be like, are you just not looking at this? Like, this is yours. What are you doing? It's all planned out. But life does, somebody trips in the living room and has a skinned knee, and or the dog is whining or whatever, but the word buffer is a big one for me. I use that with Allison B. Hansen also, who is another friend of ours and is an author. And I'm like, the buffer. I need that again, because I do work well with deadlines, but then medical stuff sometimes happens. And if I am far enough ahead, then I don't worry so much about it, and I still manage to meet the deadline. I cannot expect, yes, I can write 10,000 words in a day, but I can tell you also that I might not write for 4 days after that.
Right.
So I'd actually rather write 2,500 words a day and write every day than write 10,000 words on Tuesday and then not be able to write Wednesday through Friday.
Yep.
That doesn't help me at all. You know what I mean? So while it looks impressive on paper, the rest of it is not so much. So
it's that being able to pivot and adapt sometimes. Like sometimes you have that need, and sometimes you plunk along slow and steady.
Right. Sometimes you are the turtle, and sometimes you're the rabbit and you're just chasing that carrot. So some heinous person with their little fishing pole in the wire just kind of running you around the yard.
That is 100% me this summer. Chasing the rabbit, chasing the carrot.
Oh, and I think, I mean, it's good though to me that you have the ability to be a little fluid in that. I mean, if you do build in appropriate time, and please, for anyone who's listening, try it a couple of times before thinking that you know exactly how it's going to work. Because I don't know about you, but you can say, okay, so it normally takes me about 4 weeks to edit. Sometimes it takes me 2. But I want the 4 because if something happens, I don't have to worry about it. Or if I edit it and then I send it to my critique partners and I get it back and there's bigger things than I thought there were going to be, have you been saved by that buffer before?
Yeah, so I would say on editing, it's a little bit better.
Yeah.
I usually find that I do have the extra time on editing.
Yeah.
So that's a place where I can pick up space.
That is nice.
So absolutely the buffer helps. The other thing I would say is I think that's a really good point. So I took a class, gosh, it was probably 3 years ago now. And the coach, the primary purpose of the class was to figure out how to do things better and to also look at how your brain is wired and how you work best and really evaluate what is your work style.
Yes.
And so for me, that was enlightening because as you said, a lot of times you might hear somebody say, oh, there's just this one way to do it, or this way worked for me. And I would always feel badly that I couldn't write as fast as other people. And so I would be like, what's wrong with me? Why am I so slow? And then I realized I shouldn't be surprised because I've always been really analytical and I've always been data driven and fact driven. I'm going to write the same way. My process is not going to be that different. That is how my brain works. And that may be very different than everyone around me, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
I mean, I write with pantsers, and they just sit down and they're like, I don't know what's going to happen today. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know what's going to happen?
I had a writing session with somebody who was like 4 chapters in, and they did not know their characters' names.
Yeah. See, I couldn't.
And I was like, how do you? I mean, I would have hives on top of my hives in addition to my other hives because how do you not know their name? I have to have a title, names, what exactly they look like. And I do like having, I plot a little looser than you do. I think I don't necessarily go down into specific scenes and specific point of views, but I do say, okay, this happens and then this happens and then this happens and then this happens, because I sometimes will go on my own little rabbit trail off to the side. And this allows me to come back and say, okay, so you did this paragraph, but how the hell are you getting back to this paragraph? Because now you need to make some decisions. Are you coming back to it? Are you going to change everything? Like how would that affect the story? And so I do like having something in front of me, but I do try to allow myself some freedom so that I don't feel like I've already told the story. Why the hell do I want to do it again?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hear that a lot from people who don't want to plot at the level that I do. They would like a few more surprises. They want it to feel fresh and new to them.
Right.
I want to know every detail.
Yeah, no. And that makes total sense. And I know, and I've mentioned this on a couple of these so far, but Suzanne Brockman, from what I heard, writes like a 50-page synopsis. If I just wrote 50 pages, I'd really prefer 45 of them be the first 3 chapters.
I am with you on that one.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah. So, but if it works for her, as I said before, there's many ways to do this as there are people who are doing it. So if it works for her, go for it. And sometimes people tend to find an in between, like they like the amount of research that you do, but they're not going to be able to do a synopsis quite as detailed as you do, or they do the research while I cannot do that when people are like, just put an XXX there. No, no, that's not happening. And I will think about that. I will have nightmares about the XXX going, I got to fill that in. What am I going to do if I don't fill that in?
Nope, can't do it.
No. And that's okay. And I think if you know that about yourself, just like you were saying, I'm analytical, I'm data driven, this is how I work. I feel like then you play to your strengths. Correct. Instead of always feeling like you have to fix your flaws, I don't know that you have to fix your flaws. No one is a perfect storyteller, but take the things that you're really good at and blow that crap into the air and make it huge, you know? So there's just no wrong way to do it. So I love it. I love it. I am so excited that you are here today. And I
Thank you for
honestly,
having me.
it is my pleasure. When you have your new stuff come out, I would love to have you back on and we could talk a little bit more about all the things. And yeah, so jenniferbonds.com and then J Bonds Rights. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, J Bonds Rights on the other ones. You guys seriously go out and find this stuff because I'm enamored. And if I am enamored, I guarantee you also will be enamored. So thank you so much for being here today, Jennifer. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
No, thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Good. All right. So goodbye, everyone. I hope you have an amazing day and make sure the rest of it rocks.